I want to be honest with you about something before we start. I have tried to budget more times than I can count. I have downloaded the apps, I have made the spreadsheets, I have written the numbers on paper and stuck them to the fridge. And almost every single time, within 2 or 3 weeks, the whole thing collapsed. Not because I did not care about my money, but because the method I was using did not fit the way I actually live. So 30 days ago, I decided to stop guessing and start testing. I picked the 5 most popular budgeting methods that people swear by, and I ran each one properly. Not a half-hearted attempt, but a genuine committed trial. Today, I'm going to tell you exactly what I found, what worked, what felt like punishment, what I am still doing today, and most importantly, what might actually work for you. Before I get into the results, let me quickly explain the 5 methods so we are both at the same page. The first is the 50-30-20 rule, the most widely recommended budgeting framework in the world. You divide your after-tax income into 3 categories. 50% goes to needs: rent, food, utilities, transport. 30% goes to wants: dining out, entertainment, subscriptions, hobbies. 20% goes to savings and debt repayment. Simple, flexible, and designed for people who want structure without obsessive tracking. The second is zero-based budgeting, a method popularized by financial educator Dave Ramsey. Every single dollar of your income is assigned a specific job before the month begins. Income minus all assigned expenses equals 0. Nothing is left unassigned. Every dollar has a destination before you spend it. The third is the envelope system, a cash-based method where you physically divide your monthly spending money into labeled envelopes: groceries, dining, entertainment, clothing. And when an envelope is empty, that category is done for the month. No exceptions, no transfers between envelopes. The fourth is pay yourself first, a method that inverts the traditional saving logic. Instead of spending first and saving whatever remains, you automatically transfer your savings target to a separate account the moment your income arrives. Then you live on what is left. Savings happen before anything else. The fifth is no budget budgeting, also called conscious spending, a method that rejects traditional budgeting entirely. You automate your bills and savings, then spend the remainder on whatever you want, without tracking individual categories. The structure comes from the automation rather than from the monitoring. Method 1. The 50-30-20 rule. I started with the 50-30-20 rule because it seemed like the most reasonable and most sustainable approach. The concept is genuinely elegant. You are not micromanaging every dollar. You are simply maintaining broad proportions. The first thing I discovered is that the 50-30-20 rule requires your income and cost of living to be broadly compatible with its intended ratios. And for many people in 2026, they simply are not. In most major cities, housing alone consumes 35 to 50% of take-home pay. That means the entire needs category is already at risk of being blown by a single line item before food, utilities, or transport are even considered. I found myself having to compress my wants category significantly just to keep needs anywhere near 50%. That said, the framework itself is enormously useful as a diagnostic tool. Running the numbers for the first time told me immediately and clearly where my spending was out of proportion. I could see in one glance that my needs were too high and my savings were too low. That clarity is genuinely valuable. The 50-30-20 rule may not be perfectly applicable for everyone, but the categories themselves are an excellent starting point for understanding your financial picture. Who it works for: people who want a simple bird's-eye framework without detailed tracking, and who have enough financial flexibility that their needs do not already consume most of their income. Method 2. Zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting was the most demanding method I tested, and also the most illuminating. Assigning every single dollar before the month begins forces a level of intentionality about spending that most people, including me, have never actually practiced. The first week was quite eye-opening. I discovered spending categories I had never consciously thought about. Streaming services I had forgotten I subscribed to automatic renewals I was paying for without using small recurring charges that individually seemed negligible but collectively added up to a meaningful amount every month. Zero-based budgeting forces these into the open. because every dollar must be explicitly assigned and accounted for before it is spent. The challenge is that zero-based budgeting is time-intensive. Sitting down at the beginning of the month to assign every dollar requires discipline and takes real time. Mid-month adjustments, when an unexpected expense arrives and a category needs to be rebalanced, require further time and attention. During this time, a friend of mine was in dire need of cash, and I sent her some money, which of course interrupted my budget. Though she promised to reimburse and is a long-term friend and I trust her, these are just some of the adjustments you may need to make. For someone who finds financial administration deeply unpleasant, this method can feel like a full-time job added onto the rest of life. However, I will state this clearly. If you have ever looked at your bank statement at the end of the month and genuinely had no idea where your money went, and most people have experienced this, zero-based budgeting is the cure. It makes financial invisibility impossible. Every dollar is seen, named, and directed before it disappears. Who it works for: people who are serious about getting control of a spending problem, people carrying debt who need to find every possible dollar to redirect toward repayment, and detail-oriented people who find satisfaction in comprehensive financial clarity. Method 3. The envelope system. The envelope system was simultaneously the most old-fashioned method I tested and the one that produced the most psychologically interesting results. Using physical cash changes your relationship with money in ways that using a card simply does not. When you hand over physical paper money for a purchase, you feel it leaving your hands. There is a small but real psychological friction to spending cash that does not exist when you tap a card or click a buy button. That friction, small as it is, changes behavior. During the week, I used envelopes most strictly. I spent noticeably less in discretionary categories than in any other week of the experiment. Not because I had less money, but because the physical act of parting with cash made each spending decision feel more deliberate. The obvious limitation of the envelope system in 2026 is that the world has largely moved away from cash. Online purchases are impossible to manage with physical envelopes. Contactless payments are the default in most places. Adapting the envelope system to digital equivalents, separate bank accounts or savings pots for each category, preserves the structural discipline without the cash limitation. Several banking apps now allow you to create named spending pots, which effectively digitize the envelope concept. The deeper lesson the envelope system teaches is that spending categories need physical or psychological separation to be effective. When all your money sits in one account, the boundaries between categories are invisible and easily crossed. When money is separated, even digitally, the limits feel more real. The best thing about the envelope system is that you save more money on transaction charges as you don't use the banking apps. Who it works for: people who struggle with overspending in specific categories, people who find that card spending feels abstract and cash spending feels real, and anyone who wants to try the digital equivalent through spending pots or separate accounts. Method 4. Pay yourself first. Pay yourself first was the method that surprised me most. It is almost offensively simple as a concept. Move your savings before you can spend them. But the psychological effect of practicing it consistently for a full month was more powerful than I expected. In every previous month of my financial life, saving happened at the end. Whatever remained after all spending was done. The predictable result was that very little remained because spending has a natural tendency to expand to fill available resources. Parkinson's law applied to money. By reversing the sequence, by moving savings on the day income arrived before a single discretionary dollar was spent, the entire dynamic changed. I lived on what remained and adjusted my spending downward to fit that reality, rather than adjusting my savings downward to fit my spending. The method requires accepting a smaller disposable income than you might be used to. The first week felt tight. By the second week, I had adjusted. By the fourth week, the automated saving felt completely normal, and the reduced disposable amount felt entirely sufficient. Pay yourself first does not track your spending categories. It does not tell you where your money is going beyond the initial savings transfer. For some people, this is liberating. For others, particularly those with a genuine spending problem in specific categories, it may not provide enough structure to change behavior at the category level. Who it works for: People who consistently fail to save because they spend first and save what remains. People who want simplicity above all else in their financial system. And people who are financially stable enough that their remaining spend what you want income covers necessities comfortably. Method 5, no budget budgeting. No budget budgeting, or conscious spending, sounds like the financial equivalent of not dieting by eating whatever you want. In practice, it is more disciplined than it first appears. The method works as follows. You automate every fixed obligation, rent, utilities, insurance, loan repayments, so they are paid without any monthly decision. You automate your savings transfer on payday. Then you spend the remaining money freely on whatever you genuinely value, without tracking individual categories or feeling guilty about discretionary spending. The discipline comes not from monthly monitoring, but from getting the automation right at the beginning. If the automated amounts are correctly calibrated, bills paid, savings funded, necessities covered, the remaining spend freely amount is genuinely guilt-free because the important work has already been done invisibly. What I found during my trial is that no budget budgeting works extraordinarily well for people whose financial situation is broadly stable and whose spending is not significantly out of control. It rewards financial discipline that is already mostly in place. But for someone who is in debt, who is overspending consistently, or who has never had control of their money, removing the tracking and the structure removes the accountability that the current situation requires. The method assumes a level of financial health that already needs to exist before removing the guardrails. What you will need to account for with this method is the transaction cost for the automation of every obligation, as some banks may charge you more than others. Who it works for: people who find traditional budgeting oppressive and who have enough financial stability that automation alone keeps them on track. People who value their time and mental energy highly and want the minimum viable financial management that still produces good outcomes. What I am still doing today and what you should try. After 30 days of testing here is my honest conclusion. No single method is universally correct. The best budgeting system is the one you will actually stick to, and that depends almost entirely on your current financial situation and your personal psychology. If you are in debt or regularly have no idea where your money went, use zero-based budgeting. The clarity it forces is exactly what a chaotic financial situation requires. If you struggle to save despite earning reasonable money, use pay yourself first. Automate the saving before any spending happens and adjust your lifestyle to fit what remains. If you overspend in specific categories, use the envelope system or its digital equivalent. The psychological and structural separation of money into categories creates limits that feel real rather than theoretical. If your finances are broadly stable and you find detailed tracking exhausting, try no budget budgeting. Get the automation right and spend the rest without guilt. And use the 50-30-20 rule not necessarily as your day-to-day system, but as a diagnostic framework. Run the numbers once a quarter to see if your broad proportions are healthy and adjust from there. The one thing all 5 methods share is that they require you to know your numbers, your income after tax, your fixed monthly obligations, and your variable spending. Without those 3 numbers, no budgeting method can work because you are navigating without a map. Start there. Write down those 3 numbers today. That single act, just knowing, puts you ahead of the majority of people who are managing their money entirely by feel and wondering why it keeps running out. Click here to watch our video on why people are running out of money, because understanding the bigger picture makes every budgeting decision you take from here far more powerful.